Can I get a good amen in this house?
Well, welcome back to the Good Amen. We have an awesome, probably one of the coolest guests that we have had so far, by far. As you can see with his outfit, his vibe, his hair. Luke Owens is here. Luke, thanks for being with us here today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
The chef of Greenville.
That's right, Chef Luke Owens.
Chef Luke, the one keeps open door running.
That's right.
we definitely keep you fed.
Keep us fed.
Everything runs on Chef Luke. Here we go.
It does. He's the man.
I'm excited about this. Just to talk to you, have the conversation about kind of what's going on in your world, your life. You have done a lot of things in the past couple of years. I just actually went to your new restaurant, Native. Fine diner on Friday. It's very good.
Very good.
It's very good.
And his wife did all the decorations. So
That's right.
She designed the entire place, and it's legit.
Yeah.
That's probably the extent of her real job. Because right now she's managing the restaurant.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I don't.
How's that
she
for
might
your
not
marriage?
have planned it.
How's that for your marriage?
I might have planned it a little bit, but
that's right.
That's probably as close to what she actually does for a living that she's done in a while. Just being so supportive of what we wanted to do together with opening these restaurants, she's had to step away from, because, she owns a design firm.
Yeah.
And she's had to put that kind of, second
right
to our togetherness work.
2 adults running their own business, married, and then your daughter is, how old is your daughter?
Paisley's 8.
8
She'll
years
be 9
old.
in August.
And she's probably helping out too.
Yeah, she loves being a restaurant kid.
Yeah, I bet.
She'll come, we have babysitters and parents and grandparents that help us definitely, but there are times when she's in the restaurants and she's like, has an apron on and a towel tucked into it. And what can I do? Can I sweep? I'm like, yeah, you can sweep.
Yeah,
yeah,
you're raising her right.
Scrub this,
That's
well,
awesome.
it stops when she gets home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
of course.
we have to pull teeth to get her to clean at the house. But.
That's awesome. That is great.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit, because you actually were planning on opening a restaurant, and then in the middle of that, you kind of ended up opening another restaurant, right? Tell us a little bit about that process, what happened, what took place, and how that's going.
Well, I guess they kind of switched. One fell into our lap, and that was Julep. We had been working on Native for a couple of years, and COVID happened, and we did like a Zoom thing. Y'all remember Zoom?
Yeah,
right.
Oh, yeah. So 2020.
Yeah. So we did one of those with the landlords of the space, the SADs, and they said, we'll do whatever you want to do. We can stop today. We can pick it back up when we figure out what's going on with everything, or we can keep moving. And we collectively felt that it was best to put a pause on it, because no one really knew what was going on.
Yeah.
This was March. This was like mid-March 2020. So we picked back up on it at the beginning of 2021. And around that same time, some folks came to me and said, do you want to do a restaurant in a hotel? I said, well, I'm already working on a restaurant. They say, yeah, we know about that, but we want to talk about this. So how can we start the conversation? I said, well, there's some post-COVID needs we have, and we haven't really thought about partners, but if the things that we need are something a partnership could offer, then maybe a second restaurant could develop out of that. And that's exactly how it happened.
Wow.
Long story short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his wife designed that one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interior designed all that.
I think she's got 5 or 6 restaurants under her belt now.
Yeah.
2 of which
so
are
cool.
ours. Yeah.
It's really
so cool. And the aesthetics are phenomenal.
She's
And I think
very intentional.
it is such a cool collaboration you'll have, because the aesthetics and obviously the food and the feel all does go together. It feels like between, it feels like a whole experience when you go into either one of your restaurants, really.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
good. I'm glad that we were able to get that there, because that's what we wanted to do. We said for I guess, the entirety of our relationship, which is our marriage is close to 10 years next month. But we always said we wouldn't work together unless we did this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And,
So cool.
Just promoted one another's individual talents and
Yeah.
individuality and creativity, and that worked. And then we finally did those things together in the same space.
So how did you get into food to begin with?
I guess the surface answer would be wanting spending money
There you
early
go.
in life.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And the longer and more permanent answer is some form of consistency and stability. I didn't grow up in a real consistent way. And although in kitchens and restaurants you have to pivot pretty often on a daily basis, there also is a thread kind of woven through it where there are consistencies and things you show up and do the same exact way every single day. That's why military guys are really good in kitchens, and many other types of people are really good in that environment. But that's something I was drawn to.
Wow.
Was just the consistency of certain things and being able to be confident in something was going to be the same every day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you get really unique with kind of some of the food that you try to create. Was that something that you felt like, well, let's go back to that surface answer a little bit. You're trying to get a little bit extra spending cash.
Mm-hmm.
Was that at what type of restaurant did you start working at?
I had to get a worker's permit.
Okay, so this is real early.
This is 14 and a half.
Nice.
I think
Wow.
you have to get a worker's permit before that age. So it was the Baker's Square.
Oh,
In New Bern.
snap.
Yeah.
No, I think it's the Baker's Kitchen.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's still the Baker's Kitchen's still there downtown New Bern.
Yeah, and I believe it's part of the family that has Yoder's. Outside of Grifton or close to Grifton. But I was a host there.
Okay.
I sat people. And wasn't there for too long, and then I went to Ken's Grill. Not the one in Kinston, or maybe it's Goldsboro. I've never actually been to that one. So it's either Kinston or Goldsboro, or in between. There's a Ken's Grill. This one was owned by Ken Willoughby, who were a good friend of mine, Josh and Justin Willoughby, and I guess Ashley Willoughby was their sister. Went to Trinity with them.
Yeah.
And his dad owned a grill, and they needed help, and I needed, like I said, spending cash. So
There you go.
I washed dishes there for a little bit, and then he let me cook burgers. From there, I don't remember. I think maybe I started getting a little more serious about it at that point. And I guess I still wasn't out of high school. So places like that.
Yeah.
And then 2009-ish, went to Raleigh and got pretty serious about it and started working under people that I thought were good and I wanted to learn from, and haven't stopped.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And now you go do shows really everywhere. I mean, you've been in Charleston many times for the food and wine show down there. I mean, your food's getting known all over.
Yeah, we try to do as many of those as we can. One, just to a change of scenery. You know, being in the restaurant's amazing, and it's what we're building our lives around. But as far as work goes, but doing something with staff or even just for yourself or your family. Sometimes we treat it like vacation. You know, we'll do Charleston Food and Wine. We do Highlands, Atlanta, and wherever really, Southeast. Big shows like that, which is fun. It's fun.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, what are you most excited about the styles of food that you're cooking right now?
I think I'm finally you've touched on that we have two. Julep is pretty direct in what we're trying to do. It's a white tablecloth, fine-ish dining, which the industry is kind of moving away from, if I'm being honest, the whole fine dining thing. But that aside, we focus on Southern foods of the region, using ingredients that are as close to us as possible. We try not to get produce or fish or anything like that more than 75 miles, 100 miles out from location, and we're very focused on specific Southern foods and traditions, which is great. I'm a Southern cook at heart. That's bread and butter.
A good one.
Thank you. And, but at Native, I think, to answer your question, I'm most excited that it's a space that we can kind of do whatever we want to in terms of where we want to cook food from. Of course, we can cook Southern food there, but we have a restaurant for that, you know. And we have some Southern-ish things on the menu at Native, but we definitely still use local ingredients to make food from all over the world.
Yeah.
We're shaping out our spring menu at the moment. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like Middle Eastern stuff on there. There's a lot of Asian stuff on there, which if you guys were in a couple nights ago, you probably saw some of it. Mm-hmm. Just to have that's what I'm most excited about, is to have a place to like
be creative.
Yeah, to work with the ingredients that we want to work with, or to work with culture, to cook food from cultures that we're interested in at the moment.
Yeah.
Like in that moment.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. So do you find that creativity, like I want to ask you this, what do you do when I'm sure you have to test out these foods and see what they taste like, see what they feel like. What happens with the ones that don't make the cut? Like, because when you're exploring, I mean, obviously you're blending flavors and things like that. I'm sure there's some that you're like, man, that was terrible.
Like,
it was a good try.
Definitely. Yeah. Family meal.
Yeah.
It just, hey, we tried this today and it didn't work out. So welcome to work. And this is what you can eat before we get started.
Yeah.
Do you ever with your team have some, I would assume that you'd have to have some pretty brutally honest people working with you. Do you ever have some where it's like, I like this, I don't like this? Like, how does that process work?
Yes, and that's welcomed information for sure. Because these people, servers, bartenders, other cooks, whatever, if they're not at work at Native or Julep and they're at another restaurant, they're a patron in that place. They may still be a cook, but they're not being paid to cook. They're just like anybody else coming in to eat dinner, right? So their opinions are, really important. And if what they're serving or cooking isn't interesting to them, it's only going to be but so, long-lived.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to keep them interested in what you're doing as well. Sometimes it's difficult because how do I say this? There are people who work with us that maybe came to us because of some of the clout that we've built, if that makes sense. Like, I want to go work there because of what I've seen.
Yep.
So people like that sometimes have a hard time telling you, like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I don't can I say sucks?
No, you absolutely can.
Like it, some people are just like, yes, this is really, really good. Awesome. I'm like, there's got to be something more than that.
Yeah.
There's got to be some more feedback than this is really good.
Yeah, but I think that speaks to a lot of what you're trying to build with your culture, though, in your staff. I mean, I think years ago I went to eat at a restaurant that you were cooking at. That's how I think we first met. You have to tell how you came to Open Door, because I actually don't really know that. But
I think that's probably how I came here.
Yeah.
I think.
Was it really? Yeah. So I met him at a restaurant in Kinston years ago that Lauren and I would go to. And we engaged with you in a conversation, but one of the things that has always stuck out to me is what you said to me about how you ran your team, because you were actually managing the restaurant. You were the chef there at the time, and then I think you were managing the front of house staff and everything. And you said, because the waitress was so good, and I was like, man, she's really well trained. And you were like, well, I make all of our team go through the different functions. They spend amount of time at every one of the functions, so everybody does everybody's job.
Right.
And I was like, man. And so what I love about Luke is he's a great chef, but what he really is a great leader.
Yeah.
And why don't you speak to that, like your theories on that? Because that's very different than in a lot of the chef world that exists.
Yeah, I grew up in a a chef world where, I've had pans thrown at me.
Yeah.
I've been squirted with oil out of a squeeze bottle, like a pretty toxic, and like what you see infatuated on TV, like there to some extent is real, and we just want to get away from that, just in general. Not just, okay, we don't operate that way, but also we don't want other people to think that that's normal kind of thing. So, yeah, that's kind of threaded through there. And as far as what you were saying about everyone knowing everyone's job, it's like, well, if you don't know what someone else's day looks like, then how, in order for all of us to hold each person accountable, and to run this the correct way, we kind of have to all know what everybody's doing all the time.
So good.
You know, and of course there's some things that people aren't going to do. I'm not saying I won't, but I haven't, you know, had a server come butcher 100-pound snowy grouper.
Yeah.
You know, we don't go quite that far.
Yeah.
But like, hey, spend some time on expo or train behind the bar, or the servers need to know what the back weights are doing, because back weights are a server's assistant essentially. Everyone should kind of know what everybody else's day looks like. It's
awesome.
just fair.
Well, and I think it makes it so much. It makes it so much valuable because you know what you're asking when you ask someone. And so if, you know, someone says, you know, whatever the case may be, hey, I need this, I want this, or hey, I'm running behind, can you help me? You know, when you're asking someone for help, then what you're asking. And I think that's so valuable. It translates
That's
really
huge.
all over the place.
Yeah,
That's
and
great
another
leadership.
Right.
Another thing we say is that asking for help is absolutely a strength, not a weakness. A lot of people view asking for help as, oh, that's me being weak. I'm not good enough. You know, I can't get the job done. But like, no one ever asked you to do the job by yourself. You know, it's just like Aaron was talking about in church yesterday. God didn't ask you to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, just said, come, trust, you know, let me.
Yep.
And that's kind of the same thing. It's
That's
like
awesome.
asking for help is absolutely a strength. But you're right. Like when you're asking someone, you know, to help you with something, you should know what you're asking, what you're asking them to do.
I think that's so good. Asking is a strength, and it's you can tell it's a strength because of how hard it is to ask sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, it can be very hard to say, hey, I need help for whatever reason, whether it's, you know, you don't want to appear weak, you don't, you know, you want to do it yourself. There's a pride element to it, but it's just really difficult to ask for help sometimes.
Yeah, man, I think there's a pride aspect to it. There's all those things, but that's why, to me, one of the things that I respect about Luke the most, and I hope people feel here, is that when you walk into his restaurants, you feel excellence, but you also feel peace, and it's relaxing. There's not, the staff isn't so wound so tight of fearful of getting it wrong that they're not relaxed, and it's enjoyable.
Yeah,
and I think
that's true.
that feeling is caught in a place, you know, and for our team here, that's what I want. When people come into this place, I want it to feel like home. Well, it can't feel like home if we're so worried about everything being so perfect that then everybody's uptight.
Right.
And so there really has to be this balance. Excellence is doing the best with what you have. It's not performing to the place where there is no mistake, you know, and so, in fact, and I would say probably of Luke, like he doesn't want people in his restaurant that expect perfection. They're coming for a service, but that's not the clientele you want. And it's not the people I want at Open Door. I mean, honestly, if people are coming here to need somebody who's perfect, then they need to go somewhere else because they are not going to find it here. But it is that place of like, okay, we're here to do the best with what we have, but we want it to feel like us when they walk in. And I think that's really important, and especially when it comes to food and people want what they want, because now dining is an experience. You know, it's totally different than it was when I was growing up. Like it wasn't that. Now it's all about the experience. It's all about the feel. It's, you know, he's out front, you know, with the food, and you're watching him do his thing to the food as the chefs bring it off. And I mean, it's just a really neat picture. And even the way kitchens are now and how they're designed is a lot different than it was back in the day, which, I mean, I know you probably have a lot of thoughts on that, but now kitchens are open, so you see kind of everything going on, and speaks to integrity and all these things of like authenticity. And I mean, there's a lot to it that people don't process when they're in the environment, but if you really take a minute and step back, there's a lot of really good life lessons being learned in that place.
Yeah, I think people just want to be a part and have an opinion on, I mean, take this how you will, I guess, but, you know, they want to see what you're talking about. Okay, there's an open line. Are they wearing gloves? Are they sanitizing this? There's a glass door at Native. You know, if you guys go to the bathroom at Native and walk down that hallway, there's a glass door going onto the line that allows you to see absolutely everything they're doing, down to the floor, and if they're wearing the right shoes.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just another way to like stay accountable. You know, they stay more in tune with what they're doing. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, but you're being watched, and you know that people viewing, what you're doing they're waiting to give an opinion, whether bad or good, and that is a lot of pressure and a lot of stress sometimes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how do you in your industry, because it is open to feedback, critical, positive opinions. Somebody comes eat your food. There's no prerequisite whether they know what they're talking about or not.
Sure.
But you're kind of in an industry where that feedback is constantly coming at you. How do you handle that? How do you navigate that in a healthy way?
Not only is it always coming at you, but it's kind of detrimental to if you get to keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right, absolutely.
It's like if out of 500 reviews, if 480 of them say no.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're done.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I tell staff and people we work with, like, if you're going to believe the good reviews, you have to believe the bad ones too.
That's good.
Or vice versa. And if you can't do that, then you need to not read them at all. Then just, I get a little too focused on them sometimes.
Yeah.
I do look at them, I read them. We're real high up there.
Yeah.
On the ratings, but there are some that they'll bug me for a few days.
Yeah.
And I think just my personality type with anything, if I give it enough time, even if it's just a day or two, it just kind of settles for me. So navigating it is not overly difficult unless it's like in the moment. Like a tough one for me to deal with is, here's a 4-star, food was great, service was great, atmosphere was amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Why'd you give me a 4?
What's lacking here?
Do you just not give anybody a 5? Or
right.
Which is real life.
Yeah,
right.
It's like the health department. Like they don't give people 100.
No.
Even if it is 100.
No.
There has to be something.
They have to find it.
Something will,
That's right.
Well, and that translates a lot to what you're doing at church. You'll come in, you'll prep, you'll spend, hours prepping a message, hearing from God, and then there's you wake up on Monday morning with an email from, hey, you didn't say this right, you didn't do this right, or whatever. And everybody experiences that, I'm sure, in some capacity. Yeah. It's just you guys have opened yourselves in a lot of ways to that criticism.
Yeah, it's part of, if you don't want that criticism, then you shouldn't have gotten involved in the work. And so that's just the reality. And so it's important to read those things at the right times.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful when you read it, not to read it when you're tired. But he's right. At the truth, you have to chew up the meat and you have to spit out the bones. And there's usually a level of truth in almost every criticism. There's very few things that have been said to me negatively. I don't get a ton, but when they come, there's usually some truth in it, and I
agree.
I think you gotta find that. Now, it might be hard to find, but I think part of it too is how you receive criticism is a check against your pride. That at the end of the day, that's a lot of it. It's really like, okay, am I even willing to consider?
Right. That's right.
Because that's a check of humility, and so it just has to. You want to stay humble, and I think that's obviously a scriptural principle that we want to be good at our craft, we want to do those things, but we need to stay humble, which means we have ears to listen. And it's what's painful, but sometimes pain is good for a little bit, And I agree with you that it's just we live in a culture that criticism has become a way of communication, which is very detrimental, and I think it's dangerous. But I also think what I respect about Luke is if you talk to him about other restaurants in town, he's like the biggest cheerleader of everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to take place in church as well, is that we need to be cheering on other churches instead of being the one that just wants to get fat and happy.
Yeah.
And so I think that, all those things matter. So what you sow, you reap, right? And so, or what you reap, you sow. What you sow, you reap. Sorry, it's the third one today.
This is the third recording today.
I was going, oh my gosh, I got that backwards. But yeah, it's a big deal. Tell us about how you came to Jesus and like your faith walk and how all that works.
Okay.
Because that's a journey.
Yeah, I was raised in a Free Will Baptist church.
Yeah.
And I went to a Baptist school. I went to school where I went to church.
Okay.
Pastor Greg taught there
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
I was too young when he was teaching there for him to be one of my teachers. But I do, and I remember your sister going to school there too.
Miriam.
Yeah. And we were there every time the doors were open.
Yeah.
You know, for school and for church. I went to church Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. And you know, just kind of thought that's
what you did.
That's what you did, and that was my life, and I was perfectly content with it. And then became a angsty teenager, and I started feeling different ways about all kinds of different things. And you know, there was, I'm sure, a point where I felt that where we were going to church and where I was going to school was kind of holding me down in some way. And you know, the more I've kind of peeled that back over the years, like you said a minute ago, there's probably truth to most things. Yeah. And I think some of that is true. Yeah. You know, the more I've thought about it, prayed about it, and like talked about it. But generally my upbringing in church was pretty solid, you know. We did all the things that I think we all did, like growing up in church. Like we did lock-ins, and we did like supper clubs.
Oh my!
You know?
Oh my!
Lock-ins, where every sin known to man takes place.
That's right.
Youth pastors'
It's
heartburn.
like
That's why youth pastors have Tums.
That's right.
That's good. You know, and I was in the youth group band. I was the drummer.
Nice.
For quite a few years, and we even started writing our own songs. And then our youth pastor thought we were getting a little too heavy, so we had to dial that back a little bit. But it was still cool. He said you can come work on your original Jesus material an hour before we actually rehearse for youth group.
Okay.
So he kind of,
cool.
you know, he was again promoting us and trying to let us kind of carve away, but with some structure,
boundaries.
Yeah. And I love that man so much to this day. His name's Earl Phipps, and he doesn't live here anymore. He lives in D.C., but he was a lieutenant for the Greenville Police Department.
Wow.
And he really helped shape me a lot.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He took us on rides, like in his cop car, like after church when we got a little older, and showed us what to not do.
There you go.
What would happen if you did those things. And he really helped steer me and you know, keep me where I needed to be. And then, you know, I drifted for quite a while, and God was always kind of knocking. And, you know, for some reason, I think it's Matthew 7:7. I've always remembered it, you know, asking it shall be given to you, seeking it shall find, knocking will be answered. And what I always thought was cool about those 3 lines is the first letter of each line is, you know, ask is A, seek is S, and knock is K. So ask. And I put that together one day and woke up in my house on First Street and looked around and said, I'm not where I need to be in any form of the word, you know, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically even, you know, I'm just not where I need to be. And I called both of my parents, who were a long time divorced, but called them both, and forget, you know, word for word what I said, but basically just, you know, a big apology. And a big, just kind of like moment for me. And I still didn't get all the way back to where I needed to be. I was probably 20 at this time, and was still, you know, had all these dreams, and I was playing in a band, and I was cooking amazing food under people that I really looked up to. And I didn't have a direction. I didn't really know what I was doing except waking up and doing what I did the day before, trying to do it better, which, you know, there's a level of drive there that I think was important to what I'm doing today. But I ran for a long time, man. You know, I really did. And that's why I have this piece of art here. This is Jonah and the Whale. And I've always really related to that, running. And, you know, there's comes a time when you have to realize that you can't. Yeah. And especially if God's after you, like he was me, and he still is, you know. Had a lot of people praying for me night after night, you know. That's awesome. And it's thanks to those people, and, you know, God obviously for being so persistent and not letting me go.
Yeah, so, that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's such a cool testimony, cool story, and I love the moments and the people that just kind of stick with you. It's just such a cool thing.
For sure.
How long have you been coming to Open Door?
8 years.
8 years.
Gosh, has it been that long?
8 years. The same amount of time Aaron's life was blissful before Miriam was born. I heard it on a podcast.
That's right. That's what he said.
I picked it up somewhere.
That's what he said.
I did say that. Life forever changed. That's right.
Yeah, I think we met in 2015-ish.
Yeah.
The place Aaron was talking about that I was running at the time.
It's crazy.
It's been 8 years since I was there. So
that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, he's become a good friend, and him and Brett. I mean, it's really neat to see all that God's done in your life. I mean, in those 8 years, so much has shifted, so much has changed. I mean, it's pretty amazing, and the influence he carries with his team. A lot of his staff come here, and I mean, a lot of the people we bring in from out of town, they know him, and I mean, it's really, really neat, man.
I still come across staff. Even last week, one of our servers at Native said that she saw us here, and I was like, oh, I had no idea you went there. She's like, yeah, we go every Sunday, and it's really cool.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Greenville's like that town, man. It's a small town. There's a lot of people. I mean, it's growing, and it's got a lot, but it's amazing how many people know each other and cross paths, and it's really a cool place.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, is just the impact that you have here, because you're born and raised in the area. You said you went to Raleigh for a bit, but now you're back here, and then just the ability to make an impact here in the city that you're from, the town the area that you're from, is such a cool thing. And then to be able to see you pour into your staff and lead them so well. I did want to ask about that though, with the staff, because within the restaurant world, which I'm not super familiar with it, but you have your chefs that are you're essentially cultivating them. How often are you cultivating them to essentially go maybe get an opportunity to start their own restaurant or go do their own thing?
I hope they do.
Yeah.
I hope they do, and I hope that I can be a part of it. Whether that's from a coaching standpoint, hey, I've never had to run this number before. How do you do that? I want to be that person. And if we're doing the best work we can, and I mean, I did the same thing, and I think a lot of chefs did the same thing. You don't just get a restaurant, and you also don't just stay at one your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You pick up on you go somewhere, at least me, to pick up on how someone's doing it correctly.
Yeah.
And you can also travel and do this for free. Unfortunately, it's called staging, where you travel around and go help out in kitchens, for however long, and you learn another way to do something correctly. Wow. We paid our stages at various places in the past, and we pay our stages at Native and Julep. But for a long time, that wasn't free labor was unfortunately something a lot of places were doing late 90s into the early 2000s. And then we realized that, we're no longer okay with that. So anyway, side note, yeah, you can travel and you can, learn things from other people that you look up to or that you're interested in. And, kitchens will always take the help regardless. We used to have stages all the time. Come in for weeks at a time, or even months, or even whole seasons from other restaurants where the chefs and sous chefs were all friends, or Instagram buddies or whatever.
It's really a close-knit community, isn't it?
If it's done correctly, and attitudes stay out of the way, and egos stay out of the way. It's a very rewarding community.
That's awesome. And they do something every night. Don't you do something every night called family dinner or something?
Yeah, we do family meal where we, we put food up. I mean, it may be something quick and easy, but try to feed everybody. And we do line up where we just kind of chat about the shift before we actually do the shift.
Yeah.
But back to what you were asking me. Remind me. I'm sorry. I went on a tangent.
Just the encouraging, empowering your chefs to go out to explore their own creativity, as well as potentially go in and do their own thing.
Yeah. So we have I have a couple I have 4 sous chefs currently, 2 at each restaurant, and all of them have concepts that they want to do one day, and they're open about it, and they're eager to get my input on it. And they're like, if this is something I really want to do, can you help me get it off the ground? And I just hope that I'm in a good enough place, business-wise, financially, that when those times do come, that I am the one that's able to that's the only way you're going to keep these good people on your team, right?
Yeah.
Like my 4 sous chefs and pretty much anyone that I'm working with currently, I don't want them working in another place. But I also don't want to like stunt their creativity by saying like, I'm not going to let you put dishes on the menu. Good. I'm not going to do this, because then eventually you're going to leave.
That's right.
Right. And then what is that breeding in me?
Yes,
fear.
Sir.
Right. And we talked about fear yesterday.
Yep.
We don't want that. You don't want to be fearful. Right. So how do we pour into people enough to like promote them enough and get them to where they want to be, give them enough space. And then of course still try to keep them on the team. Yep. How do we do it? Well, maybe we put this concept in our restaurant group, if that's okay with you, because you're valuable to me and I love you and I don't want you to go anywhere.
That's right.
But I don't want to stop you.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Well, what I love, and just hearing you talk about it and hearing your story, is you can see the intersection really of biblical principles that are intersecting into your leadership and what you're doing in your restaurant, which I can imagine is probably pretty uncommon in the restaurant world.
For sure.
If not uncommon, not often talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something you definitely try to keep separate. I think.
For sure. And that's what I was going to say. It's like you're bleeding these principles in there, but I'm sure you have to do it in a way that's not like, hey, look, this is what we're doing because here's what it says in James chapter 3,
Right. Yeah.
But the way you're doing
Stephen
it's
Curtis
really
Chapman's not blaring on the music.
That's right.
Exactly.
It just is such a cool way, and it seems like such a gift that you have to be able to really live out your faith more than just I gotta talk to, because I'm sure you get people that are all different walks of life, different faiths, different religions, and you have to cultivate a welcoming environment for them as well.
Right.
And
yeah,
it's just really cool.
You nailed it pretty much. I mean, I don't know how well this will reflect on me, but it's the truth. So, I think that it's not that we try to like not talk about God in our establishments, but it's also like, I can't speak for my wife or anyone else that goes through this. I can only speak for me, but like, I've recently starting like dipping my toe into it, so to say. It's like I will talk about it a little bit, or even a few nights ago, Aaron was in, and I did see you guys, but I did not get to go over to your table.
Oh no, we were gonna. We talked about it. Like, y'all say hey to Luke. I'm like, looked like he was doing his thing, and so I was just gonna. we'll catch up with him sometime. So,
but when Aaron came in, I said, "Yes, my preacher." And one of my cooks, she's actually our lead line cook. She said, "You're a preacher," and I was like, "Yeah." And she's from up north, and she was like, "I've never heard someone say they have like that's my preacher."
Yeah.
I was like, "Well, what do you call it? Like, what do you mean?" She was like, "I don't know. Like people where I'm from say like I go to church, but that's not like my preacher."
Yeah.
I was like, "But he is my preacher."
That's right.
I don't know how to say it, So like even 2-3 years ago, like I would maybe see Aaron and, "Oh, who's that?" "That's a buddy of mine."
Yeah.
But today it's like, "That's my preacher." He's the pastor. Cool. He's the pastor out of Open Door. Like, so for me, finding a balance, I don't even want to call it a balance. I think it's more of a like something I've had to work on personally in my spiritual life is like, why have I in the past felt like I needed to like kind of push that down to people that maybe don't go to church, or I don't know if they do or not. Are they going to be okay with this? Like, are they going to look at me differently? But like, if they do look at me differently, what am I losing by professing that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, I just feel
really
like
good.
Ultimately you'd be rewarded
for
something like that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
We're not exactly as Christians and believers and followers, we're not the majority.
No.
So like, I think just that idea has made me shelf it a little bit, at least in certain areas or conversations. But even taking this podcast, I'm like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Well, I think too is that what we're realizing is people need real Christianity, not fake religion.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, so it's really just saying, hey, I'm just going to be where I'm at. And I love what you said. You said it's been a journey and you figuring it out. But those little steps, it's what God's doing in his life. And I see it, and it's neat to see. But, we've been friends for a long time now, 8 years. I mean, that's a really long time and a long journey. But I just want you to know that every time I'm in your places, then I feel like I know that God is there and that God's using you in a mighty way, and that staff and everything. And it's just neat to see all that you've put your hands to and how God's blessed you in a mighty way. And your family's blessed for it. You got an amazing family. And you do put your faith high on the list, which is really hard to do in your line of business. Yeah. And I just want you to know that it's making a difference in our community, and I'm grateful for you.
Thank you.